"Let's walk on the road to Oaxaca," Don Juan said to me. "Genaro is waiting for us somewhere along the way." His request took me by surprise. I had been waiting all day for him to continue his explanation. We left his house and walked in silence through the town to the unpaved highway. We walked leisurely for a long time. Suddenly Don Juan began to talk. "I've been telling you all along about the great findings that the old seers made," he said. "Just as they found out that organic life is not the only life present on Earth, they also discovered that the Earth itself is a living being." He waited a moment before continuing. He smiled at me as if inviting me to make a comment. I could not think of anything to say. "The old seers saw that the Earth has a cocoon," he went on. "They saw that there is a ball encasing the Earth, a luminous cocoon that entraps the eagle's emanations. The Earth is a gigantic sentient being subjected to the same forces we are." He explained that the old seers, on discovering this, became immediately interested in the practical uses of that knowledge. The result of their interest was that the most elaborate categories of their sorcery had to do with the Earth. They considered the Earth to be the ultimate source of everything we are. Don Juan reaffirmed that the old seers were not mistaken in this respect, because the Earth is indeed our ultimate source. He didn't say anything else until we met Genaro about a mile up the road. He was waiting for us, sitting on a rock by the side of the road. As the conversation continued, Don Juan explained that what he called the key to everything was the first-hand knowledge that the Earth is a sentient being and as such can give warriors a tremendous boost. It is an impulse that comes from the awareness of the Earth itself at the instant in which the emanations inside warriors' cocoons are aligned with the appropriate emanations inside the Earth's cocoon. Since both the Earth and man are sentient beings, their emanations coincide, or rather, the Earth has all the emanations present in man and all the emanations that are present in all other sentient beings, organic and inorganic for that matter. When a moment of alignment takes place, sentient beings use that alignment in a limited way and perceive their world. Warriors can use that alignment either to perceive, like everyone else, or as a boost that allows them to enter unimaginable worlds. Such is the opening passage of chapter 13 of Carlos Castaneda's book, The Fire from Within, and the title of that chapter is The Earth's Boost. Greetings to the crew of the Gaian Navigation Experiment, to friends, students, and allies scattered across the planet, and anyone else who cares or dares to listen. This is John Lash, your navigator, speaking in the early hours of the morning of the 28th of November, 2013. This is Nav Briefing 96, the boost of the Earth. I'm sitting up here in my little navigation room with my black cat Nikita. She's having a little breakfast. It's just before dawn, and soon the waning crescent, known as the sunrise crescent, will rise over the hills to the east. We are now in completion with Kamala, and so the sunrise crescent will be a thin crescent rising in the form of the left hand, that is to say with its arched back to the ground as you look east. As you know, we observe these lunar shifts of the Dakini energies or moods as part of Planetary Tantra, and it has come to be included, this observation has come to be included in the GNE as well. I was looking back at the ephemeris a while ago, and I saw that I was born in the completion of the Kamala shift of 1945, the separation between the sun and the moon at the time I was born was about 9 degrees or 18 hours. So there would have been a thin, barely perceptible crescent on the horizon on that day. As you may recall, being in completion defines a situation when the Dakini wisdom streaming from the planetary animal mother downloads into your body and into your cellular awareness and into the body knowledge that we all have as human animals. At the beginning of each Dakini shift, there is typically a flash or a series of flashes of cognitive insight, cognitive illumination. It's not uncommon for observers to have brilliant realizations and definitions of syntax at the moment, the very first hours of a Dakini shift. I've described this experience in some detail. Then leading to the first quarter, that is to say, the 7th day of the shift, the subliminal instruction of the Dakini on shift comes into definition. So the first quarter moon, seen in the western sky after sunset, represents the definition of Dakini wisdom, bringing it into language, bringing it into syntax, or into some form of expression. It doesn't always have to be verbal. It can be brought into expression in many ways, but it is brought into conscious expression and definition. Then throughout the remaining 14 days, with the full moon at the center, there is a process of living through this Dakini wisdom, of reviewing it, of applying it, of seeing the applications of it and the manifestations of it, both in the external world and in the psyche. Finally, coming to the last quarter, or the hinge, there is often a solution to questions, challenges, problems, and riddles that arise in the course of the shift, which define themselves in the idiom or theme of the presiding Dakini. And then, in the last 7 days, and particularly the last 5 to 3 days of completion, this distilled wisdom, which has accumulated through the shift, kind of changes frequency. It slips into a different gear, into a different frequency. And through that frequency, completion occurs. That is to say, the Dakini instruction of the month is integrated as body wisdom. So it's interesting for me to consider that at the moment I was undergoing the experience of birth, coming out of my mother's body, in those hours of that December day, the wisdom of Kamala was in completion. And I guess it's fair to say that I've carried the Kamala wisdom all my life. Kamala is not my guardian. Kali is my guardian. But there must be a special relationship, for each one of us in fact, to the Dakini on shift at the time we're born. And this would be a subject of interest, something that would be worth investigating. Now, I've been very reluctant to talk about love through the years, but I've overcome that reluctance at moments, haven't I? So I've said things about love, transpersonal love, personal love. Certainly, Kamala has very special instruction about love. In particular, what is the love of Scorpion Mother? How can a scorpion be loving? You know, when you're stung by a scorpion, it might be compared to being stung by love. The scorpion seizes its prey with its claws. Well, you consider that these claws, on the personal level, are the claws of desire. So before you love someone, desire seizes you. Desire for that person. Desire to be loved by that person and to love that person. That's the claws of the scorpion, considered on the personal level. Then the tail comes up, and the sting is in the tail. Well, of course, the sting is in the tail. What is the tail? The tail is the repository of Shakti in the human body. So the sting comes from the pelvis. The astrological sign Scorpio is always associated with sexuality, the mysteries of death and sexuality. So the sting is the consummation of love in its sexual expression. The reason why sexual congress and orgasm are associated with death, and that's a long-standing association, is because the individual actually dies in the sexual embrace. Orgasm is a surrender of the ego, and it's a melting away into an egoless state of bliss. And this, too, is an expression of love. Love involves surrender, and surrender to love could be considered as a theme of Kamala. But the ego never surrenders to love. So ultimately the ego must die for love to survive. I've said recently that love is rational. A lot could be made of that proposition. It's worth discussing and examining at length. I don't want to go into an exposition on love right now. I'm simply not in the mood, and I have other prevailing topics to discuss in this briefing. But suffice it to say that I'm convinced on this day that the true nature of love in the human animal is practically unknown. Although there's a lot of talk about love, as Rajneesh observed, it's all the preaching of love that has destroyed love. I conclude that an understanding of love, a recognition of its true nature among human animals, is extremely rare. I'd also like to say something about the way that I love, and that is with the awareness that everything is always at stake and nothing is at stake. That's the way that I love. It makes me sad when love is used as an excuse for destructive and delusional behavior, but this is more often the case. One of the great difficulties of love is overcoming the desire for exclusion. If you arrive at loving one person in this life, that's an enormous triumph. And are you going to stop there? Or go on to love another one? Jealousy may be considered to be the paroxysm of emotion that occurs when you are seized by the claws of the scorpion. Jealousy is like a set of claws, and what it cannot seize and hold and claim to itself, it will tear apart. Jealousy is despicable. I don't know if Kamala teaches how to overcome jealousy. I seem to have not required that lesson. I'm just not a jealous animal. There's a wonderful saying I'd like to impart to the crew as part of the oral folklore of Planetary Tantra. The natural hunger of the human animal is polyamorous. So what I can give you in this little prefatory remark regarding this moment now, in completion with Kamala, what I can give you is a simple proof of love, that if you've ever loved any one person, you can easily go on and love another. The love of one person does not exclude loving others. And when the beloved person makes that demand, they introduce a poison into the dynamic of love. The natural hunger of the human animal is polyamorous. If you've had the high good fortune in this life to love someone, you can prove that it truly is love by going on and loving someone else. The affection of the open heart is natural and spontaneous, and the truly open heart never closes. It's empty enough never to have to close. And so, if you reach the happy fortune of loving someone, and you go on to love others, I can attest that it becomes easier. Love is easy, and it's simple, and it's obvious. And that is why no claim to love is required. To say, I did that from love, is already a lie. It's not necessary to say so. Love manifests itself, as so beautifully described in the poem by Guido Cavalcanti, Donna mi piega. Love reveals itself through its accidente, through the incidents and happenstances that do not claim to be love. I've never claimed to be a loving person. So, those are a few thoughts on love, and I'll leave it there at the moment and move on to the primary theme of this briefing, the boost of the earth. I remember clearly when I read The Fire from Within. I was in Amsterdam at the time, and it was in May of 1986. And I am certain that many of the things Castaneda said in that book registered deeply in my psyche at the time. And certainly the opening passage from the chapter that I cited at the beginning of this briefing. You know, I've said that Carlos Castaneda's work, his legacy, his method and mystique of neo-Toltec sorcery is the warm-up act for Planetary Tantra. And as time goes by, it looks to me more and more that that is exactly the case. Those of you in the GNE and those of you who are engaged in Planetary Tantra will certainly have the same impression as myself upon hearing these words. How could it be any more clear? How could it be any more brilliant than the way it is stated? in these couple of pages. Now let me go over a few of the points in that citation. In the first place, for Don Juan to declare to Carlos that the ancient sorcerers discovered that the earth itself is a living being is a bit odd. It makes it sound as if the ancient sorcerers were on to some secret that perhaps, let's say, ordinary people were missing. I don't think so. You recall that I said, in Not in His Image, that animism is not the belief that the natural world is alive and animated, but it is the direct perception. Well, animism is the norm for the human animal, Animism is the natural and sane condition of human awareness. So all ancient and indigenous societies, insofar as they were sane, insofar as they represent the true potential of our species, and insofar as they reflect the true nature of this experiment, were animistic. It's as simple as that. So late in the 19th century, when the anthropologist Tylor, Tylor, put the word animism into discourse, he was describing something endemic to the human animal, endemic to human consciousness, that never had to be defined before. And as so often happens in these matters, the essential element of human experience came to be defined at the moment that it was at risk of being lost. What impacted the animistic capacities of the human animal and what destroyed the conditions in which animism could be maintained as a natural predisposition of our awareness was, of course, the Industrial Revolution in Europe. So Tylor was European. He was writing from the viewpoint of a European or Eurocentric intellect. And as far as Tylor was concerned, at the point when you came to define animism, it's no longer the generic and universal trait of human society, but it belongs to what is called primitive or savage society. Obviously, even at that late date, at the end of the 19th century, a vast majority of humans living on the planet were still living in an animistic condition. In Australia, in South America, in the remote areas of Siberia, in the Pacific Islands, animism was a concept to Tylor and the armchair anthropologists of that era, such as Sir James Fraser. But it was still a living reality in a great part of this planet. So to put a fine flourish on Castaneda's language, I would say that the sorcerers of ancient times did not discover that the earth itself was a living being. That was a self-evident fact to everyone living on the earth for millennia. What they discovered was that the earth in its totality can be regarded as a living being available for interactivity. The earth in its totality. The instructions in the Terma of Gaia Awakening come from the earth itself. I have something to say about that claim soon, by the way. So in order to wrap your mind around the grandiose notion of the Terma of Gaia Awakening, you need to consider that the earth as a totality, acting as a single entity, could instruct the human species in how to communicate and interact with the earth. This is the premise of the Terma of Gaia Awakening. Clearly, that is a direct and consistent, that proposition is a direct and consistent follow-up and elaboration of what Castaneda says in this stunning passage from The Fire from Within. He says that the earth is a gigantic sentient being. Well, there's Gaia theory, which, by the way, in 1987 was just beginning to get off the ground. It had been in discussion for about 10 years. It was common at that time to hear the proposition, Gaia, the living earth, is a gigantic superorganism, a gigantic sentient being. Two ways of saying the same thing, right? Now what about this mysterious business of the cocoon? Well, Don Juan says that the ancient sorcerers perceived a cocoon ensheathing the earth. Do you suppose that that would be a reference to the organic light? I would certainly think so. In the typical syntax of Castanedan sorcery, this cocoon of light, which surrounds the earth, encases the earth, is comparable, of course, to the luminous egg that surrounds and encases each human animal. And the language of sorcery coming from Castaneda makes it vividly clear that both these cocoons are packed with filaments. I would prefer the word filament to the word emanation. Direct perception of the organic light shows that it has a mycelium-like character. It is throbbing with tightly packed filaments. You can actually feel these filaments and see them. You can actually touch them. So here again you see the advance from Castaneda into Planetary Tantra. It's an advance of syntax, among other things. It certainly is an advance of method, a huge leap of method. But method depends upon clear syntax. It always remains somewhat impalpable and abstract to talk about emanations and great bands of emanations. Well, emanation is a term, of course, in Gnostic cosmology. It is a synonym for dreaming, the dreaming power. So once again, to put a fine flourish on Castaneda's syntax, I would say that the luminous cocoon of the earth, which consists of organic light, is full of filaments, which are living mycelium of the dreaming power of the earth goddess. Her dreaming power is material. Everything is material. Her dreaming power manifests in the filaments of the organic light. These filaments pervade and interpenetrate the entire material world. They saturate and vibrate through all of the realms of nature, organic and inorganic. And these filaments of the organic light assume a particular configuration within the luminous egg of each individual being. Now you might recall that I wrote a piece on metahistory.org describing some 14 or 16 parallels between the work of Carlos Castaneda, the teachings of Don Juan, and Gnostic teachings. I'd venture to say that all these parallels are really remarkable, but there is one that stands out. I have in my hands a little book called The Doctrine of the Subtle Body in the Western Tradition. The author of this book is G.R.S. Mead. G.R.S. Mead was a theosophic scholar and an early scholar and researcher of Gnosticism. And this is all pre-Nag Hammadi. This is at the turn of the 20th century. G.R.S. Mead was closely associated with Blavatsky and the Theosophic movement. He was for a while, I believe, the co-editor of the journal Lucifer Gnosis. He's the author of the magnificent compilation on Gnosticism entitled Fragments of a Faith Forgotten. In this little book on the subtle body, Mead recovers the ancient word for the luminous egg, as it was known in the pagan mysteries. So what Carlos Castaneda calls the luminous egg, or luminous cocoon, of the human animal, was called in Greek in ancient times the Orgoides, Augoides, Orgoides. And Orgoides is a strange word that suggests a cocoon or enclosure consisting of rays or emanations or filaments. And so G.R.S. Mead writes that that the soul may become entirely ray-like, and he has the word orgoides in parentheses. What does it mean that the soul is ray-like? Well, it means that what you call your soul is not something immaterial, but is actually a cluster of these filaments. Of course, Castaneda talks a great deal about the clustering of these filaments. He goes so far as to say that the ancient sorcerers perceived that on the macro scale, the clustering of the filaments produces different worlds. And by the shifting of the assemblage point, the sorcerer is able to enter and return from those worlds. As you know, one of the outstanding teachings of Castaneda concerns how we organize the perceptual reality of our world. To explain how this is done, he says simply that you perceive the world as it is. Human animals tend to perceive it in a similar manner due to the way that the emanations surrounding us are clustered together and fixed at a certain point. He called that the assemblage point. Well, if you go in further into Mead's book, you come to page 60. Here he invokes the name of a number of known teachers of the mysteries, namely Isidoros, but he also mentions Hypatia. And he says that he quotes, actually, a passage found in a reconstruction of some lost Gnostic writing. And the passage goes like this, quote, "The soul has a certain radiant vehicle, Orgoides Shema, as it is called, star-like, astroides, and eternal. And this vehicle is securely shut away in this gross body, according to some within the head, according to others within the right shoulder, a statement which no one else seems to have made." End quote. Well, Castaneda said that the assemblage point is located behind the back, about a foot out from the body, positioned off the right shoulder, didn't he? Even the ancient writer to whom we owe this fragment of Gnostic intel had to remark that the detail about the right shoulder, the positioning of the egoides, that is to say, the locking in of the totality of luminous fibers into a point on the right shoulder, seems to have been made uniquely by Isidorus, who was of the same Alexandrian school as Hypatia. So there you go. How do you like them potatoes? How do you like them spuds, me mateys? Now I'll make two more brief comments on the passage I read. Let me quote again directly. The most elaborate categories of their sorcery had to do with the earth. End quote. Well, I rest my case. The sorcery of love and intention, which is a phrase to describe planetary tantra, is the present-day, real-time set of strategies. It's the real-time methodology for the sorcery that has to do with the earth and is in fact interactive with the earth. And I have said before that courtings, spells, and exercises of sorcery in planetary tantra work because they are assisted by the boost of the earth. They do not work independently. This proposition, this condition is absolutely imperative to see the distinct and incomparable character of planetary tantra. You know, there's a great hunger for magic on this planet. There have been, and continue to be, many attempts to satisfy that hunger with junk food and delusion. So you could argue it either way regarding the Harry Potter phenomenon. You could say that those books brought to the forefront the tremendous hunger, especially among adolescents and people in their early 20s, for magic. But did it deliver magic? Does Harry Potter deliver magic? Is anyone today practicing Harry Potter magic? Likewise for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Likewise for Charmed, which was an American TV series about 3 witches. The Craft, I think, is another TV series. Witchcraft and the hunger and fascination for all things of sorcery throbs in the human endopsyche. It throbs like jungle drums and like the tambour of shrieking priestesses of Cybele in the hills of Anatolia. But who answers that call? And what is the method for the sorcery of this time? The method for the sorcery of this time depends upon what Castaneda indicated in this passage. It depends totally upon the boost of the earth. And anyone who thinks that they can practice magic or Wicca or neo-paganism without a specific, clear, and rigorous method to engage the boost of the earth is deluding themselves, and they shall be sorely disappointed. Interactive magic with Gaia. That is planetary tantra. That is the direct follow-up, and that is the main act coming after Castaneda. Finally, he points out that the ancient sorcerers saw the earth as the ultimate source of everything. Well, haven't I been saying this for a while? The objection to that, of course, goes like this. But wait, how can the earth be the source when the earth itself was created? And wait, John, you say that the earth itself originated in the pleromic center because it is a metamorphosis of the massive currents of organic light of the aeons of fire. So it's not the earth that is the ultimate source. It is the pleroma that is of our galaxy that is the ultimate source of the earth. And then what is the ultimate source of the pleroma of our galaxy and all the other countless billions of galaxies? And so forth and so on. Wouldn't it be more correct to say that the ultimate source is out there somewhere in the infinite, the origin of the entire universe of countless galaxies, rather than to say it's right here under your feet, under your fingernails, in front of your eyes. You are sitting on it. You are breathing it. It is breathing you. What would you prefer? Well, let me assure you, my friends, that the Gnostics were very clear about the ultimate source. The ultimate cosmic source is the originator. And the immediate, imminent source of life is the planet Earth on which we live. Do you want to override the immediate source and go to the originator? Well, you're free to do that, but I can tell you it's a boring adventure. And the closer you get to the originator, the more catatonic you become. I've said before, at the Shiva ground, Parasamvit, the ultimate ground of awareness of the entire universe, nothing happens. Everything that is happening in the universe is happening in front of your face. What is here is there. What is not here is nowhere. The action is here. That is why in Planetary Tantra, you can revere the earth for all her beauty and magnificence and for everything she is, and at the same time recognize in complete humility that she is the immediate source of your life. I said before, and I have to repeat it again, that you are not alive right now, today, listening to my words, listening to the recording of my voice, because when you were born, you were given a certain quantity of life, like a battery has a certain quantity of life in it, a certain quantity of energy. And when that quantity expires, the battery is dead. You're not a battery. Your body is not a battery. You were not given a certain quantity of life the moment that you were conceived and then later born into this physical atmosphere. You are given life at every instant. You are alive now because she sustains your life in her dreaming. And if she withdraws her attention from your life for 1 microsecond, you die. So what is the ultimate and immediate source? The earth. What is the ultimate non-immediate source? The originator. That's all the metaphysics that you need. There needs to be no constructions around this simple and obvious metaphysical proposition. And the Gnostics taught this proposition in the mystery schools. And it was fundamental to their cosmology. Finally, in commenting on the passage from the Fire from Within, you find their theme often repeated and elaborated in the books of Carlos Castaneda, the alignment of the great emanations, of the external cosmos, with the alignment of the emanations within the luminous egg of a human animal. Now, how would you translate this concept, which is absolutely one of the 4 or 5 fundamental concepts of Castaneda's neo-Toltec sorcery? How would you translate it into the syntax of Planetary Tantra? Well, it's simple. The sorcery of love and intention is a method of alignment. The alignment between the earth and the human animal is a simple matter. In fact, intention is a force of alignment. Intention is a force and instrument of alignment. More specifically, to talk about the dynamics of alignment, let's say the ritual dynamics, a cording is an instrument of alignment. Cording consists of filaments, doesn't it? String strung between the branches of a tree. A cording is a ritual tool. It's a way to align your intention with the intention of the planetary animal mother, so that she gives the boost of the earth to your intention. Simple enough? The alignment of human intention with the dreaming of the Aeon Sophia is, of course, the aim of Planetary Tantra. It is also what you are learning in the GNE. It's a big deal to learn this. So be patient with yourself, be loving with yourself. We are actually on a fast track of learning. 3 years or 10 seconds of her time is the amount of time we have to learn the essentials. As this alignment between each of you and the Aeon Sophia locks in, what happens? Well, the question we're all living with as we come into the final second of the 3 years of initialization of correction is the question of when does she boost us out of the nightmare and into perfect alignment with her dreaming. Remember that the initial conditions of the Aeon Sophia in this 3-year period are perfect. She is an Aeon. She can only set perfect conditions. Now, if you wonder, if you sometimes think, as I do, of course, as we all do, well, these are great propositions, but it's really elusive. At the end of the day, it's pretty elusive what she's doing. And why isn't it more obvious? And why aren't the manifestations more blatant or spectacular? Well, you're a human animal. And in fact, you are incapable of conceiving perfection on the aeonic level. I cannot conceive the perfection of her dreaming. I can conceptualize it, but I cannot realize it. The perfection of her dreaming is not within the reach and scope of human awareness, and yet we are deeply implicated in that perfection. Hence, the subtle finesse to be observed as you monitor her correction. You must realize that you are monitoring a process that is many, many, countless times exponentially more vast than everything that is happening in the ocean right now, everything that is happening in the Pacific Ocean right now. The human animal is not capable of grasping such immensity. And so her perfection, which she is indeed achieving in these 3 years, perfection of the initial conditions, eludes us. Now, the only way that you or I am able to experience that perfection is when it presents itself to you in granular detail. You can experience it in the granular detail. But you must be present at a level of awareness, lucidity, sobriety, balance to observe the granular detail. I know that the passion of the Aeon Sophia has become your passion. And she who is prunikos, or outrageous, has taken over your lives in some cases, hasn't it? Well, there's no better way to go, because whatever the future may hold, if you consciously unite your personal life with the life of the earth, then you have a future with the earth. And ultimately, she decides the shape of that future. I know, however, that some of you are dreaming about how correction could manifest and what might be, let's say, the flagrant and extravagant demonstration of her correction. One crew member recently wrote to me on that theme. His name is Nestor. This email arrived on November 27th, and I'd like to read it to you in its entirety. I have been reviewing the themes of the fallen goddess scenario and Sophia's correction, and I had some thoughts I would like to share. Living in these times where archonic systems have reached a level of intrusion into life that is unprecedented, I feel a compelling inspiration to imagine and anticipate a way out of this mess. The themes of Sophia's mythos bring a clarity and sense of elation to my mind about the possibilities of participating in her correction and finding solution. Humanity's discontent with its emaciated spirituality and disconnect from the source which emanates the anthropos has reached an intolerable level. Humanity can no longer stand the repression of its innate playfulness, imaginative creativity, and hedonic erotic powers. This repression is mirrored by a growing pressure and inflammation within the earth caused by the blockage of this telluric energy. Mantis is agitated and begins to crash violently into her crystalline chamber. The crystals vibrate, and the earth creaks and vibrates beneath our feet. It is at this moment of intense agitation that we command Sophia according to her desire to assist in ending this plight. In a state of interactive magic, we engage our hedonic powers with the libido of the wisdom goddess. The pleroma is alerted to the situation and provides a cosmic burst of Shakti energy. The burst is directed to the Pleiades and then to Sabaoth through the effect of pleromic relay. Sabaoth modulates the searing intensity of this energy wave with the assistance of Jupiter. They modulate the emanation of gentle waves that stroke and caress Gaia, heating her body with erogenous energy. Gaia completely disrobes her magnetic field and embraces the pleroma. Her energy and that of the pleroma dance and twist in the atmosphere in a dazzling display of love. In an energetic crescendo of ecstatic release, she unleashes a massive orgasmic pulse of electromagnetic energy. In the span of that moment, the complete network of our quantic construction dissolves. All electronic circuitry is scorched by the Shakti power of the wisdom goddess. The blockage of her telluric energy and that of the anthropos has been released, and Mantis follows the energy path of the kimberlite pipes and bursts out of her crystalline prison to freedom. The earth shudders and moans in orgasmic climax, the atmosphere being lit with the erotic plasma energy of the wisdom goddess. Her sensuous libido cannot be denied. Humanity witnesses and participates in the direct effects of this event. The wonderment and beauty stops the world. Archonic deception crumbles, and the gears of technology are halted. All systems of domination collapse, lacking their networks of control, and communities of human animals are left to their own ingenuity and creativity. The setting is provided for a sublime level of learning from the source that emanates all life on earth. For a time, the atmosphere enveloping the earth remains extremely charged. Arcing can be witnessed on the arrays and constructs of the past. Simple yet imaginative implements can be fashioned to gather and collect this free energy. energy becomes distributed, allowing humanity the needed time to power down and return to the flow of Gaia's dreaming. Thank you again, John, for bringing us the narrative of her story. It brings great hope and inspiration. Goddess, grant me what love's deeds desire of love. Nestor. Well, there's one vision of the boost of the earth manifesting its naked beauty and power across the entire planet. The last line in the letter is a quotation from Parzival. You may recall that recently I read the passage in Parzival, I think it's chapter 2 or 3, which contains the line, "The anchor is the wandering knight's mark." And also in that same paragraph is the phrase, quoted here by Nestor, "Grant me what love's deeds desire of love." Well, as I contemplate that remark, it's a remarkable statement. My mind goes back to the moment, and my eyes turn to the sky. It's pitch black here, 7:08 a.m., and the sunrise crescent stands high above my house as I look toward the southeast. The crescent moon of Kamala in completion. Kamala, she who instructs on the mysteries of love and death. You know, her instructions are closely interwoven with those of Vishvamata. Remember that the scales are held in the claws of the scorpion, aren't they? The whole picture of reset, the picture of reset in the scorpion scales scenario is a facet of Gaia's dreaming emerging and erupting in your own imagination. Just think of what you have in the GNA. What you have is the language to know what erupts in your imagination as a human animal. The scenario of reset described here in such a spectacular way in this email from a crew member. This event is so immense that no human animal can encompass it conceptually. Yet you are implicated in it profoundly. You and I are implicated in this reset process. And reflecting this morning on Kamala as a love goddess, I guess I could ask the question that finally comes to the surface of my mind. I could ask myself this question, and you can eavesdrop, okay? You can listen in as I ask myself this question. What is the role of human-to-human love in the reset of the wisdom goddess? How does the dynamic of human love factor into the reset of this experiment? In the GNE, we have the syntax and the method to follow the reset as far as human beings could do such a thing. And we have, therefore, access to that power in human imagination which is as vast as the constellations themselves. The constellations are just a liquid crystal display of the play of human imagination as it weaves in Gaia's dreaming. The constellations are a feedback device to read, register, and direct your own dreaming power. So what is the relation between imagination and love? What is the relation between the dreaming power in each individual animal and our simple capacity to love? I think this is a discovery to be made right now. I think this is a precious revelation to come from the Kamala shift, from this decisive moment. I think this is a revelation that each of us can receive in some way, coming up out of the endopsyche of the anthropos itself. I said a while ago, a year ago, it was in the summer of 2012, I said to a certain woman of my acquaintance at that time, Sophia needs our love to complete our correction. That statement is typical of the outrageous, if not insane, generosity of the Nahual and the main Turton. It's possible that I waste a lot of my generosity on people who don't merit it. This is a pattern in my personal life, insofar as you can say I have a personal life. But nevertheless, the proposition is true. Whether the individual to whom it's directed can handle it or not is not my problem. She needs our love to complete her correction. But how? It must be made eminently clear in the minds of Calico warriors that love is not the solution for the sickness of the human race. Love does nothing for the psychopaths. Loving and forgiving those who are the spoilers and merchants of death, who would destroy the anthropos and the earth, is no solution. That is not the solution. Love operating in that way is not the solution. But the love between us, those who share this vision of Planetary Tantra, is a powerful, powerful synergy on this planet. And the friendship of strangers is necessary for her correction. Speaking for myself, I would have to say that I love the earth more than anything. More than anything else. But knowing that the anthropos is the subject of her experiment, and that she inadvertently became the setting of that experiment, well, that realization has a certain pathos in it. And in that respect, I love the anthropos as well. But that doesn't mean I love every single human being walking around on two legs, because the anthropos is not present in every human animal. And to assume that every human being has humanity is a great, great delusion. We wouldn't be in this mess if that were true. The anthropos, which perhaps would be the subject of an upcoming briefing, is not a given in human identity. The anthropos is a solidarity of recognition. The anthropos is sobernost, to use the Russian word that was very popular among the Sophianic mystics of the time of Soloviev, Biely, and Bloch. Sobernost, solidarity, comes in the anthropos. It comes in an agreement about what humanity is. So our role as accomplices to Sophia's correction requires to define and maintain that identity. The identity of the anthropos is an agreement. It is not categorically given by the mere fact that you were born as a human animal. You carry the anthropos by carrying the recognition of the subject of this experiment, knowing that you are the subject, and bringing that same awareness to others, sharing that awareness with others who likewise know that they are the subject. Those of us who know together that we are the subject of this experiment and that the human genome originated in the galactic core have the solidarity of the anthropos, and we love it. We love it. We love it to death. And inside that love for the anthropos, there is a sacred way to foster our love for each other. And as far as I'm concerned, any other love for each other that is not inside that solidarity doesn't count. It doesn't count. Because this is a one planet proposition. This is a one planet experiment. And the experiment hinges on a one species identity. All the creatures of Gaia's anatomy, of her anatomy, I love that. All the creatures of her anatomy, all the creatures of her menagerie, even the microscopic and microbial creatures can celebrate her correction. All species are involved. But the nature of this experiment depends critically on its main subject, doesn't it? All the creatures may return, the bees, the whales. They've returned several times before. All the creatures in extinction may be regenerated as they were during the Cambrian explosion. And they will all participate and enjoy and benefit from the success of her correction. But no other species except the human species is critically and intimately complicit in that correction. And love is the factor that sustains that ultimate complicity. Love. Love is what keeps you alive. Really alive. You can exist and not be alive. Love keeps you alive. Love is the ground of this divine complicity in Sophia's dreaming. There's no obligation in love, you know. You're not obliged to love anyone. You do it for the sheer pleasure of it. And the natural hunger of the human animal is polyamorous. So I would conclude this briefing by inviting you to be with me under the sunrise crescent of Kamala and to enter into a meditation on love and stay in this meditation until March 2014. And as a token of this meditation, as a kind of ritual of initiation, ritual of commencement for this initiation, I invite you to listen to Donna Mi Priega by Guido Cavalcante. Because a lady asks me, I would tell of something that happens often and with force, and brings change upon itself, which I call love, so that those who deny they can sense its truth may, in this way, come to know about it, I believe. Not that I hope any whose hearts are base by mere reasoning may assume to comprehend it, for lacking the sense of its own evidence, I have not skill nor wish to offer proof how it proclaims where it originates, what is its power and its potency, its essence and its innate movement, so delighting that it makes us call it love, or how anyone can make it show itself. In that realm where memory resides, it assumes form in self-defining light that shines, diaphanous, out of a dark, conflicting hue. Then it holds still, so as to be created and sensuously named, divined in the soul and willed in the heart. It comes from what is seen as it so intends, which is then taken to the waking mind as a pure subject, fixed and abiding, yet even in this, not to be possessed, because no one can lessen its pure feeling, its resplendent and perpetual effect, not sensed merely for delight, but in the contemplation of how incomparable it truly is. Devoid of power except in how it gains a perfection it alone can measure, such as cannot be reasoned, but is felt, I say. Beyond salvation, it keeps to its own way, and holds intention worth as much as reason, yet barely shows how it likes what it lacks, thus by its power seeks its own undoing. Since in its strength that power hides the hindrance that lends to love the bent of contradiction, though never turning it against itself, but measuring how perfectly it varies, so random none can say how it invites a continuity not to be commanded, and likely to be taken for abandon. It is released when will so far exceeds all that is not within its natural grain, it can no longer hide in resignation. So it moves compellingly, and running through its colors laughs off our fear, then turns away as it subsides a bit, sunk in its own veracity. Only the courageous come to know it, a feeling ever new, an ever-moving breath that drives the self-reflecting mind to look into another form, uneasy, but roused as if it broke into a blaze. None can imagine it who cannot test it, for it moves not unless it moves as drawn or as released when its own pulse is touched with confidence of knowing, great or small. Its seeming a mere surface guards its nature, so it compares to pleasure, which I reckon can't keep it hidden once it's joined up with it. Even before its beauty startles like a dart, It bores through trepidation, making way for whoever may deserve to follow its direction. And not by knowing how its sheer appearance comprises light of such contrasting moods and vivifies without becoming obvious, but by being led by what flows from it. Beyond the shades of all divided essence, hewn from the darkest hue, its radiance outshines every and all deceit called worthy of faith, that from this source alone is born compassion. You, my song, may go forth well protected where it please you, for you are so adorned to be praised, surpassing reason, by all those who sense your intimation. But for the others who cannot, you have no inclination.